Welcome back to Tech Tip Tuesdays at Imagination Creations. Today we're going to look at using Trapcode Particular within After Effects to have one particle emitter emit various different types of particles. Now on its own, Particular can only emit one type, be it a sphere, a streaklet, etc. But here we're going to look at a way to trick it into emitting many different types of particles. In this case, our example is going to be for a sports store that sells all kinds of various sports paraphernalia. Let's take a look at how we do that. The first thing we need to do is create our own custom particle. To do so, we're going to go into Adobe Illustrator. Now here in Adobe Illustrator, I have a whole bunch of different sports equipment and icons of those, and we're going to use those as our particles. Now what we need to do is make sure that each sports item is on its own layer. So you could see that our hockey stick's on one layer, our skates on another, our tennis racket's on another, and they're all broken down here into different layers. So that's what we need to start by doing. The next thing we could do is make sure that these sports icons are all in the same exact position. So I'm going to select them all and then align them all to the center, both horizontally and vertically. So now it looks like a bit of a mess, but really we know this is many layered particles on top of each other. Next thing we're going to do is jump into After Effects. Now, in After Effects, I have a blank composition here with just a blue background and a black mask over it. I'm going to double click to import my sports icons. Here they are. Let's open those. Now we have to make sure that they're being imported as a composition, not individual layers. That composition is going to act as our custom particle. Let's say OK. And there it is. Now let's open up our composition with our icons. What we need to do is make sure that each of our icon layers is just one frame in length. I'm going to select all my layers and then hit Alt and then right square bracket. That will reduce them all to one frame. My composition is already quite short and it's the exact length I need it to be. That's why it looks quite large, but really it's just one frame in length. And then they disappear. The next thing we need to do is spread out these layers so they last the entire composition, each at one frame. I'm going to right click, Keyframe Assistant, Sequence Layers. I don't need any overlap, so I'm just going to hit OK. Now that's going to fill up my composition with just one frame layers. If your composition ends up longer, just trim it down. So if I scrub through, we can see that at every frame, I get a new icon. So these are going to be the basis for all our different particles. So far, so good. Now let me go back over to my composition that I've created. There it is, just a blank composition with a blue background. I'm going to take our new sports icons, drop them down at the bottom of the composition. We could see that it's really a small layer because it's only 16 frames, but that's okay. I'm going to make that layer invisible, but we're going to use it later. Now I'll need to create my particle layer, so I'm going to create a new solid. Let's call that Particles. Doesn't matter what color it is, and say OK. Make sure it is comp size. Now, in my effects and presets, I'm going to search for Particular. Here we go, and bring that in. Now by default, Particular will just emit particles like this, small white dots. And that's fine as a starting point. What we need to do is change those white dots to our particle layer that we've created. To do that, we're going to go into Particle, change our particle type to Sprite Fill, and I'll explain why in a bit. Now they've all disappeared. That's because we haven't assigned a layer yet. Under Texture, we're going to assign the layer to our sports icons that we've just dropped in. You might get a warning that the layer size is too big. You could choose what size you want it to be. I kind of ignore this warning sometimes, but it might slow down your rendering. So you could make your layers quite a bit smaller if you'd like to. I'm just going to say OK. Now I don't see anything happening yet. The reason is because we want the layers to just choose one frame and stick with that frame per particle. So I need to change my time sampling to random still frame. When I do that, I can see some very small particles here, but they're barely noticeable. Next thing I need to do then is increase my size. Each particle is set to 5 pixels. If I bring that up to 100, now we see everything a little more clearly. Let's make it 200. Let's just play it and see what we've got. If I hit play here, you see that our particles are coming out. They all look very static. They're all not rotated. They're all kind of coming in the same position, and they're disappearing and appearing very sporadically. So, a few things we need to fix. First thing I'm going to do is go into my emitter settings and change my emitter type from point to box. What a box is going to do is it's going to emit it from all kinds of points all over your emitter size, and not just from one point in the center. So my emitter size, I'm going to bring it up to my comp size. 1920 on the x-axis, 1080 on the y-axis, and just for fun, I'm going to bring the z-axis to 2000 pixels. This is going to allow us to add some depth of field with the camera later on. So if I play this again, we can see that things are really spread out now, but they're still disappearing and appearing in a strange way, and they're kind of moving in a strange way, and I don't really like that look. So next thing I'm going to do is change the way they're moving from uniform to outwards. Now you could do whatever you like for your project, but this I know is going to work kind of well for me. So basically now they're all going to be coming forward towards the viewer. That's great. Next thing to do is perhaps make these particles a little bit bigger. Let's bring my size up to 250. It's a little easier to see. And now let's deal with the rotation. In order to make it look a little less predictable, we could change our rotation to be a little more random. Under rotation, I'm going to put a random rotation of 20. Now right off the bat, they're looking much better and much less consistent. The next thing I like to deal with is the fact that they're appearing and disappearing in a very strange way. Let's stop that for a second and adjust our opacity. Now, our opacity right now is at 100% the whole way through. What we're going to do is change the opacity over life. If I choose this curve, it's going to start at 0, go up quickly, and then go down at the end of their lives. Let's play that and see what happens. So now we can already tell that they're moving a lot more smoothly, coming in and out in a much smoother way. I'm going to stop that now. The size, I think I'm going to add some variation to it. Let's add about a 50% variation. And let's bring our size up to maybe 500. That's getting a little better. Now, our color we can adjust as well. Earlier, as you remember, we chose Sprite Fill and not just Sprite. What Sprite Fill lets us do is choose our color based on something we select. So for set color, instead of at birth, we're going to change it to random from gradient. Now the default, not the prettiest thing, but let's change that a little bit. I'll change these blue patterns. I think that looks nice. Also, my opacity, let's add some randomness to that. Maybe 50%. And this is looking a little bit nicer. Let's hit play and see what happens. So great, that's a good start. Next thing I want to do is add a camera so we get some depth of field going. Some particles are in focus and some are out of focus. So I'm going to add a new camera. Make sure enable depth of field is checked. You can change the settings, but for now this is fine. Now that that's checked, first of all we get a better angle of view, given the angle we chose in our camera. I'm going to hit AA to adjust my depth of field settings. My aperture is what we're going to look at. It's right now at 17.7, which is the default. Let's bring it up to 100. Now we can immediately see that some particles are way in focus, some are out of focus. We could bring that number up higher to make that effect more dramatic. The other thing that we can do is in our particles, we could adjust our Z size, maybe 5,000. And that way some particles are going to be way further away and some are going to be way closer. I think that's a bit too much. Let's go for 4,000. Great, that's a little bit better. Also, I think I'm going to adjust my emitter size, make it a little bit wider, perhaps 2200. Maybe even a little more. And my Y, 1500. It's going to spread things out a little bit more and make it a little more interesting to look at. So this is really great. Why don't we do a RAM preview and see what it looks like? So there you go. Custom, unique, different particles being emitted with one emitter from Trapcode Particular within After Effects. This is a great effect, and I'm sure you'll find great ways to use it. Please send any questions or comments our way, and we'll be happy to help you with any problems you're having. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click here to subscribe to our channel for more great tips every week, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I'll see you next time.